Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about HubSpot. If you're hustling in the trenches to build a business or bootstrapping one of your own, let's talk about an AI-powered tool that can lighten up your workload a bit. HubSpot's Campaign Assistant is a game changer for creating marketing campaigns at scale. It quickly turns your key selling points into a cohesive pitch, which helps you deliver knockout emails, ads, and landing pages in minutes. So let Campaign Assistant take care of the campaigns so you can get back to growing your business. Work smarter, not harder at HubSpot.com/campaign-assistant.
Howdy, folks. It is Thursday, April 27th. I'm Jacob Cohen here with Juliet, Bennett, Rylah, and you are listening to The Hustle Daily Show. Today we're talking about spam, and no, not talking about the canned meat. We're talking about the scammy kind of spam, the stuff that increasingly, as we'll discuss, is probably keeping cybersecurity experts up at night, as advances in AI also mean advances in scamming. But first, before we get to that, let's talk about what else is happening in the world of business and tech. Let's get crack-a-lacking. Okay, first things first, you can't always get what you want. Microsoft learned that yesterday. Its $69 billion acquisition of gaming giant Activision Blizzard hit a hurdle yesterday with the UK's antitrust authority blocking the deal. The UK said Microsoft already accounts for 60 to 70% of global cloud gaming services, and that if Microsoft were to go through with the acquisition, that position would only become stronger, reducing competition in the space and affecting how the market develops down the road. A high-stakes appeal is forthcoming from Microsoft, and Activision Blizzard called UK closed for business in a note. So the disses were out in full force. Moving along, Meta's Q1 earnings came out last night after the bell, and investors apparently found them to be better than meh, as the stock popped in after-hours trading in response to a revenue beat and a better-than-expected forecast. Speaking of Meta, the Metaverse Beauty Week will debut on Decentraland, Roblox, and Spatial from June 12th to 16th. This is an interesting nascent space we've touched on before. According to Roblox's own numbers, nearly 3 in 4 Gen Z respondents to the company's surveys have said that they spend money on digital clothing and accessories, and 58% of them believe a career as a digital fashion designer is just as impressive, if not more impressive, than that of a physical fashion designer. That is interesting to me. And in other news, unfortunately, it looks like Amazon's Halo division was not able to keep a healthy balance sheet. In a blog post, Amazon said it decided to shut down its health-focused Halo hardware unit and discontinue all its devices, as well as lay off some of the Halo team. These devices include the company's Halo Fitness Band, which is basically a copy of the popular Whoop band. And interestingly, this seemed to be a sector with long-term potential for Amazon, especially given its recent acquisition of One Medical, but guess it was not meant to be. Also interesting because this announcement comes the same week it was reported Apple is working more on its own health-focused features. And closing in on the end, it is closing time for Texas realtor Ben Caballero, who has been profiled in our very own newsletter for his absurd home selling rate. In 2020, he set a world record of 6.4 thousand home sales, presiding as the listing agent over around $2.46 billion of sales volume. And when we wrote about him last year, he was on pace to sell at a rate of around 16 homes every day. And as it turned out, he surpassed that and set a new record, reportedly selling 6,178 homes, so around 17 a day, worth some $3 billion in houses. How about that? And lastly, good news for those of you tired of real-life dystopian thoughts like, when will I be replaced by AI? And that's because Black Mirror will return for its 6th season in June, following a 3-year break. With that, let's talk spam. Okay, so obviously nowadays we live in a world that is dealing with really bad spam and scam problems. And last month, the FBI reported that its Internet Crime Complaint Center received more than 800,000 complaints last year, with losses exceeding $10.3 billion. And what's wild about this number is that total number of complaints actually decreased by 5% year over year, but total dollar losses increased 49%. And phishing schemes were the number one reported crime type. Investment schemes, though, reported the highest total financial loss, and the greatest dollar loss was incurred by citizens 60 or older. Juliet, this problem is only going to get worse, no?
Yes. And now what's interesting is I think there's some differentiations between spam and a scam that we'll get into. But basically, so John Liccato, who is the director of the Advancing Human and Machine Reasoning Lab at the University of South Florida, so he is researching the intersection of AI and natural language processing and human reasoning. So very interesting guy. Wrote a piece in The Conversation talking about how spam is going to get smarter, and that is going to be enabled by generative AI. And then there's going to be this kind of battle between the AI that tries to stop spam and the AI that gets around spam. And it actually sounds like a big fun Black Mirror episode, honestly. So essentially what's going to happen in here is you get spam email all the time. I'm sure I do too. But now AI is going to cook up these new tools to get around these filters. And it's also going to become more compelling and more personalized. Already, we know that AI can learn to write in someone else's voice. So it could potentially mimic someone you know, or it could learn the type of writing that you gravitate toward and replicate it. It can also predict information about a person based on what's publicly available online. So what's on your LinkedIn, any other social media that you might have. That'll make AI and in turn spammers able to be more persuasive to try to get you to open that email or give it the information it's looking for. And here is where I think it gets kind of scary is we know that AI can replicate people's voices. We just had a story the other day about how voice artists were finding their own voices replicated on sites that used AI, which of course is bad for business because if you don't care about getting an Academy Award-winning performance out of your voice artist, you can maybe just do this AI thing and save a lot of money. And we also know AI can whip up pretty believable images on the fly. And so now in a future where what is real even, things are going to get really confusing. For example, I have had about 30 people in my life send me images of extremely goth cat beds.
Okay.
So they are like these Victorian four-poster black beds with little cats on them. And they're like, you should get this for your cat because these people know me very well. The problem is these products do not exist. They are generated by AI. But if someone sent me a link to a site where I could buy such a cat bed, I would potentially be convinced it was a real product and try to buy it and give someone money for something that doesn't exist.
Wow.
And in the same way, we've also seen, and this is where it gets into scams, right? We've also heard stories about kidnapping scams where someone calls you and pretends to be your relative using some sort of...
Yep.
Yes. So there's all sorts of like very odd scenarios that I'm sure would be right at home in Black Mirror that could be happening here.
Yeah, I think like you just described it well yourself with that own case that you could potentially deal with. The personalization is a really, I think I see that being a really problematic area.
Yes.
Can only imagine.
Right. And we already see that with algorithms. I click on one site to buy a houseplant, and all of a sudden now, within 30 seconds, all of my ads are for houseplants. The algorithm knows I want to buy a houseplant. It's like, hey, this person wants to buy a houseplant. But at least the houseplants I'm buying, exist.
Right. All right. So big problems. We're obviously also still very early in this whole space. Everything's still being worked out on both sides. Is anything already being done about this to address this issue? So
we've got cybersecurity firms who are on the case. OpenAI has talked about setting guardrails for AI. We've seen Google and all these other places with their chatbots trying to make sure their chatbots don't say things that are totally egregious or offensive or give people dangerous instructions. But it's kind of just, as with every technology, a battle between people who want to use it for cool stuff and people who want to use it for bad stuff. And I think we're going to see this escalation between the two parties. Obviously, a way to get rid of spam is to perhaps train an AI model to find spam, have more intense ID verification programs, educating users about spam. I think one of the reasons that we see these scams hit people who are 60 or older is because they're not growing up with the same technologies that people younger are. Like,
sure.
I am somebody who knows if I'm talking to someone on LinkedIn and they seem fishy, I might be able to reverse image search their profile picture and see if maybe that's just a stock image and I'm not talking to a real person. I'm pretty sure my grandmother would not think to do that because she didn't grow up with those things happening around her. So, and the problem with all of this, including even educating people on what's possible, is that it does take resources. It does take a lot of work. Obviously, the FBI and the FTC, they put out warnings all the time, but you got to get those warnings to the people. So I think it's going to be tough. I think we're going to see a lot of weirdness before we see things stabilize.
All right, and bada bing, bada boom, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in to the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor today is Ezra Trupiano. Our executive producer is Darren Clarke. We've got a lot more tech and business coverage in our newsletter, which you can sign up for at thehustle.co/email. Hope you have an awesome Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hey guys, if you listen to the Hustle Daily Show on Google Podcasts, we want to let you know that the option will no longer be available pretty soon. Google is sunsetting its podcast app sometime in early 2024 in favor of YouTube Music, and we want to give you a heads up before it's too late since that time's almost here. The Hustle Daily Show is available everywhere and anywhere that you listen to podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're using YouTube Music, we are there as well. If you're an Android fan, there are plenty of apps like Overcast, Pocket Casts, Player FM, and more. So just search for us wherever you decide to listen to your favorite podcasts.